Welcome everyone. Today we'll be talking about strategic sourcing and procurement management in this video. Now, to differentiate between what is purchasing and what is procurement, let us dive into details. For procurement, it's a process that involves the acquisition of property, perhaps for the plant and or equipments, goods, works, or services through purchase, hire, lease, rental, or exchange from any other sources other than buying for the organization. Whereas purchasing is completely, largely a transactional activity of buying needed for goods or services. This involves placing and processing purchase orders, POS, or requisition. So that is what differences is all about it. Procurement might not be outright buying, whereas purchasing might be outright buying. In either of the cases, purchasing can be having a down payment or deferred payment or mm, payment on the basis of credit lines. Procurement might be rental basis, might be on higher basis, might be utilizations of the resources then and thereby. So that is needed. That's a fine difference between procurement and purchasing, perhaps. So, what are the benefits of procurement? Number one is the reduction in the cost. Some organizations spend up to 50% or more of their own revenue on the purchase of raw material, perhaps for the work in progress, finished goods, spare parts, services, and other goods needed to keep the organization up and running. Quality improvement. The quality of raw and other materials used in producing goods affects the quality of the end products thereby. Product enhancement, improving products and process design by helping introducing new technologies into companies' product and service offering, which usually works with an internal and external engineering personnel and supplier to improve product reliability and performances while also reducing the cost thereby. This is of vital importance per se. Let me divulge the functions of procurement. The goals are very simple: purchasing materials and services at the lowest possible cost, that while ensuring the requisite quality levels, meeting the needs for internal and external customers. So procurement function is to have the best of the both worlds, as in best quality and the lowest price, perhaps. Why we are looking into it? Because this satisfies not only the internal customers, internal stakeholders, but also the external customers or the external stakeholders, supporting operational requirement, working with other functional groups. Procurement and operations, procurement and quality assurances. These are the two things that will always be in juxtaposition with one another. Procurement and operations, procurement and quality assurances. Well, we need to manage suppliers. These are one of the things that needs to be taken into consideration. Why? Because at no time does an operation needs to be halted just because of the lack of procurement or lack of availability of raw materials. So managing supply is much more important. Supporting organization goals and objectives. And if you have noticed it, I have replaced the word, the alphabet S with the sign of dollars. Supporting organization goals and objective. It is all about dollars that we need to mint about it. We need to procure at the lowest possible cost. At the same time, the objectives and the goals are of the highest epitome that we talk about it. Developing sourcing strategies thereby. Procurement function, the goals are very simple. We are trying to support the organizational requirement per perhaps, and how do we go across with it? This is what we are looking into it. Working with other functional groups. Yes, definitely. When I say other functional group, we are talking about warehousing, we're talking about supply chain, we're talking about customers, we're talking about quality control. So there are things that need to be taken into consideration. Managing suppliers. Perhaps multiple suppliers at times are better. Perhaps single supplier at times are better. Why? Because single supplier, you might be bargaining. You might have a bargaining power in your things, which might not be the case, because if you have multiple suppliers, you might be looking at a smaller quantities that needs to be procured. In the single supplier, you can have a long-term contract which assures the businesses for every one of us. Talking about the supporting organization goals and objectives thereby, why do we look into it, the objectives and the goals thereby? How do go across it? Developing sourcing strategies as on when on basis. So roles and activities are performed by procurement functions. Requirement defined for procurement, identifying potential suppliers, initiating RFP or RFQ, as in request for price or request for quote, as the case might be, and placing POs or purchase order, managing and measuring supplier performances. Now, these are the active roles of procurement functions, right from defining what is required as to the exact quality of the materials that you're looking for, identifying the suppliers as to who is going to source it from which all places. We would love if it is sustainably sourced, responsibly sourced material, initiating for request for price and request for quote where it needs to be understood, placing the purchase orders as on when on basis, managing and measuring supplier performances thereby. Types of buying organization. What are we looking at buying organization? We are talking about commercial organization, governments, institutions, private schools, hospitals, universities. Everything counts in the long run. The public organization is a railway first, as the case might come across it. Let us talk about the product and the service purchased. What are we looking into it? We are looking at the raw material, probably of semi-finished goods, probably the capital item that comes around it. Yes, OEM or original equipment manufacturer component parts, as in the spare parts that can be accrued for, maintenance, repair, operating materials, or MRO material, as in case. Now, these are work in progress, work in finished, in between, preventive maintenance, regular maintenance work that needs to be done often. Yes, we are also talking about finished goods, finished products, finished services, and major subcontracted items as on when on policies as we go across with it. So product and services that can be purchased, I repeat, would be raw materials, semi-finished goods, capital items, original equipment, manufacturer's component part, MRO, or material repair operating materials, finished goods, finished product, finished services, major subcontracted items thereby. What are we looking out here? And if you look into it, this particular, for your understanding, the flow of goods is in this fashion. Remember, this is the fashion, the flow of goods are moving around it. So please, all of you, take a note of it. First and foremost thing, you need to identify the requirements. Based upon it, can we describe the product and services accordingly? Search for the supplier, thereby evaluate, select the suppliers as often as possible. Then we will be talking placing for RFP or RFQ. RFP stands for request for price or request for quote as a process. Before that, you need to look for the placing orders and evaluating the performances as on when on basis. Let us move into the strategic sourcing. The process of determining long-term supply requirements for finding resources to fulfill these needs, selecting suppliers to provide these services, negotiating purchase agreements, managing suppliers' performances thereby. This is what we are looking into it. We are aspiring to be a world-class processor, world-class suppliers, coordinating procurement activities, managing risks thereby. Now, why are we looking at strategic sourcing? Strategic sourcing need not be only responsible sourcing. Strategic sourcing need not be only green sourcing. We have to ensure that there is no dearth about the raw material or the source material at any point of time. We'll look into strategic and alignments as and when on basic. Now, what are the company's goals? If I may say so, first and foremost thing is ROI, return on investment, perhaps. So maximum return on the spend that we are looking into. Company will always aspire to go around it. So procurement goal is to consolidate the spend with as minimal fewer suppliers as possible thereby. So reduce supply base by 20%, establish a price targets at the rate by at least 5%. Procurement objective. Yes, we are talking about company goals, recruitment, in terms of product quality, in terms of end item customers. What are the procurement goals thereby? Improving quality of purchase material, implementing Six Sigma total quality management program by the top 5 spends of the suppliers to achieve zero defects. The idea is to look for zero defects, reduce overall expenses, reduce expenses to optimize the procurement, analyze procurement process flow, improve productivity by at least 10%. Every time we are looking at an incremental improvement, marginal improvement goes into the long way to improve upon your total quality management objective. So company strategic goal will be to concentrate on our core competencies. Procurement goals remains to be outsource non-core competencies items to the suppliers. establish a firm make or buy decision as on when on basis. Let me take you to the portfolio analysis, classifying procurement into four categories based on the qualified suppliers or items, what kind of items that we have been looking into go for, or the values that we are talking around it. But in terms of dollars values, how many $1,000, how many $1,000,000 item that we are looking into it. If things are very few, the items are number few, but value is also low, it's a transactional day-to-day utilization item. So it's a transactional relationship. We need not focus much on this. It's a win-lose approach, probably at best case scenario. But what happens when the value is more and the items are few? So these are critical items. Definitely. So here we need to form a bond with the relationships with the vendors. So we let us have a collaborative approach, which needs to be focused on cost and should be win-win situation for either of the vendors, either of the clients. Let us look into when there is a call, a number of items are plentiful and the value is minuscule. It can be ignored items. So it's a market items. Probably again through a competitive relationships, the market will drive the price down. You don't need to focus upon it. It's a price focus definitely. Again, based on a win-lose situation. But then what happens when plentiful of items are required and those each items are high value items? Now these are the places where you need to go for deferred payment, deferred let's say freight charges to be included. We are looking at leveraging items. This is where every vendor and a client needs to move as a win-win situation, and the best method to go for it is to have a cooperative relationship, which again should be focused on the cost per se. So, strategic sourcing processes, if I may say so, is we need to define the business requirement using the commodity strategies. Then we need to have the strategic importance of the product or probably the system that needs to be procured around it. First, the objectives. Second, the importance. The pedagogy of the objectives comes around it. We need to mark those milestones small and steadily. Determine the requirement of the market or do a market analysis thereby. Set your goals, conduct a gap analysis, and you will be able to identify, in fact pinpoint where your attention needs to be focused upon it. So accordingly you developed a strategic sourcing strategies, probably the objective thereby, and implement it. Eventually after implementation everything needs to be monitored, everything needs to be controlled to ascertain whether your analysis went wrong or can it be improved in a due courses of time. So last but not the least, we'll need to rationalize the supply base, determine the best values, the appropriate EOQ, economic order quantity, what is the best value in terms of your revenues per se. Total quality management with the suppliers, we look to improve the quality, continuous qualities improvement. Sourcing globally, quality wise, price wise, what is your sensitivity? Long-term supplier relationships and supplier development, building up a supplier to support business. We are talking about early supplier involvement in design, TCOs, a total cost of ownership, price plus the additional cost expected during the ownership as the case might be. And obviously, yes, one thing which is getting noticed and is being adopted by every emerging companies is e-procurement. This can hammer down the cost, this can hammer down the supply chain cost, variable cost, and so on and so forth. With this, I come to an end, I suppose, for the sourcing strategies and procurement management for this particular video. Thank you for watching this video till the very end.